So,
Ray, don't forget to press record.
I've just pressed record, Robin. Welcome, everyone. I'll just start things off. I'm Ray Middleton, and welcome to this week's Blab about Pi. That's psychologically informed environments and ways to help homeless people with multiple complex needs and complex trauma. And I'm a system broker for Fulfilling Lives and mental health concern in Newcastle and Gateshead in the UK. And we work with over 100 people with multiple complex needs, homelessness and addiction, mental health problems, offending, that sort of thing, who are difficult to engage. And I'd really like to welcome SLevy from the States. Hi, Jay.
Hello, everybody.
And Claire, Richy, and
Hi.
Robin. I'll ask you to introduce yourselves in a minute, but they're all authors around this issue of homelessness in different ways and engagement. And Jay's written books about pre-treatment. Claire's written the guidance that Westminster City Council, guidance on Pi. And Robin's the founder of pilink.net. Just briefly, for anyone in the audience that's new to Blab, is you can write comments, questions in the chat that comes up at the side, and anyone can kind of post in websites and links in that as well. And if you do want to ask a question, you can just ask it. But if you do /Q and a space, and then ask your question, it's easier for the host to see that it's a question that you'd like to ask one of the people in the chat. But we'll probably spot it if you just have a go. So that's a brief introduction. I'm really excited about our guest this week and having a good chat about the topics this week. So maybe if I ask Jay to just introduce yourself and say a little bit about your journey.
Well, first of all, I'm excited just to be here and have this transatlantic conversation today. Well, my journey started off in New York City. I was working I lived in Brooklyn, and I was coming across homelessness right on my doorstep on a day-to-day basis. I would come across this natural issue of people asking for money and not knowing whether to give money to help or what to do. And I kind of realized over time that it'd be great to learn people's stories and find a way to help that was more meaningful than just throwing a couple of coins, in a cup. Went to social work school at Columbia University, started doing outreach with the Manhattan Bowery Corporation on the streets there. And I did work there in Boston and then out in the woods of Western Massachusetts. So I've worked with people who are homeless in a lot of different environments. And I think a number of the issues I came across, really a lot of frustration in terms of being able to access services for people that were in dire need, really got me into writing. And then I wrote a couple of books and journal articles, and things kind of took off from there.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Jay. And we'll come to ask you some questions about your writings in a moment, but it might be nice to ask Claire to just introduce yourself and say a little bit about your journey that's got you to Blab.
Thank you. Hi. I've worked in homelessness for around 20 years, from working with people living on the street to being in supported accommodation, and then more recently as a commissioner of rough sleeping services for London Local Authority. And first came across psychologically informed environments when I was doing a review of all the services in the borough and looking at how we could make sure that they were actually strategically meeting the needs of the people on the street. And we'd recognise that a lot of the people were going round and round, weren't getting the support that they needed. Mm-hmm. They weren't able to engage. Our services couldn't engage them as a result of complex trauma issues. And read the guidance that the CLG had published, that Robin was involved in, and was really impressed with it and thought, well, let's give it a try. So commissioned a hostel in Lambeth to become a psychologically informed environment. We were very lucky because we had enough money to employ a couple of psychologists. I know you don't need psychologists, but we were very fortunate to have them. And it's been a great success. And last year we received funding to roll out the programme across a couple of other hostels in the borough. So it's going from strength to strength.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for that, Claire. And just briefly to mention, the audio's maybe not 100% today, but for future reference, if anyone's got any, the iPhones have a little earphone with a little, halfway down is a little bud where you can talk to it as well. And if you plug that in, that improves the audio if you had one. Don't worry about it if you haven't today. And also having a secure connection to the internet rather than Wi-Fi is a little bit better. But we've got a good enough connection to be able to have a good conversation today. So before we ask some questions about the topic, Robin, could you say a little bit about who you are and your journey that's got you here?
Short version.
Always harder to do.
The short version.
The short version, yeah. The thing is that I already know Jay and Ray and Claire, so this is not so much for you guys, but more for anybody else who might be listening in or watching. I was a social worker actually, even before I was a social worker, I got involved with specialist mental health units for people with what we now call a personality disorder, therapeutic communities. And then I got involved, I became a mental health social worker through the 80s and 90s. And I started finding that in a lot of the homelessness services that I went to, because some of my clients ended up there, I was seeing the same kind of care, the same kind of attention, and often the same kind of commitment, but also real thoughtfulness, real emotionally intelligent work being done by a lot of the homelessness services. And a lot of it looked to me and sounded to me very similar to the lessons that we were learning in psychiatric hospitals about how you work more effectively with these very damaged, traumatized, marginalized, excluded people who were now ending up in homelessness rather than in mental hospitals. And I started just saying, listen, guys, there's some really interesting, fascinating, brilliant work being done here. We need to start sort of praising this, researching it, and just sharing practice. And really, that's,
that's really helpful, detail, Robin, to give a brief kind of journey, because I've been thinking about journeys and narratives of people's lives. And I suppose people have a journey of getting interested in this kind of work for lots of different reasons. I suppose very briefly, I'm in recovery from multiple complex needs myself in the 1990s, and then since then I've managed personality disorder services and set them up, and I've done various things, but I suppose I've got a bit of lived experience of addiction and mental health problems quite serious in the 1990s, and then got on a journey of recovery, and part of my journey was working for the last sort of 16 years in this area, but I'm kind of motivated towards that group of people who have multiple complex needs, probably for that reason, really, because having been excluded, but then I've done a lot of things since then. So there's a lot of things we could talk about, but maybe just to start the ball rolling, I was thinking about Jay's book about pretreatment. And one of the questions which might help to start the conversation off is, I think it's a really good book, it would be good for frontline workers to read that in terms of being therapeutic to that group of people who are often outside of services. And one of the things you talk about is about often the person who wants to help and the person who's homeless with complex needs might be in different worlds, and they could be very different worlds. And then you talk about the need to create a common language in order to bridge these two worlds. And I thought that was a really interesting point. And I wondered, Jay, if you could maybe say a little bit more about the creating a common language when you're trying to build a relationship of trust between these often different worlds.
Yes. Well, Michael Rowe, who's also an author and a writer and a researcher, talks about that there's a boundary, and there's a boundary where outreach takes place. And there's on one side of the boundary, there's the world of the person we're trying to reach and connect with. And it's about us really understanding that person's words, ideas, values, culture, aspirations, their struggle for survival, the different challenges that they're experiencing. And the way we tune into that and build trust with the person and develop a client-centered relationship is really crucial to the work we do. Now, on the other side of the boundary, there's these other worlds we deal with as outreach workers, and that's the worlds of services, resources. If you talk about benefits in the States, it would be Social Security. And Social Security kind of has its own house of language and set of values and defining eligibility criteria, where you have to understand that they're going to be very focused on the word disability and whether or not you can work or not. Or if you're referring someone to a mental health clinic, there's a whole different house of language that defines the mental health clinic and kind of the office culture that takes place over there. So they'll use words like mental illness, psychotropic medications, psychotherapy, psychiatry. So when you're working with the client, the person that we're trying to meet and help, it's really important that we think of our outreach workers as both interpreters and bridge builders. And it's really about understanding the language of the client and being able to make offerings, whether it's offerings for a benefit or for counseling or to get on lists for housing or whatever it is, to enter a program that might be helpful toward moving their lives forward. It's really important to be able to tap into the meaning that the client has in their world, their words, their ideas, their values, and to make the offering in a way that can resonate with the person so that they can truly consider the option, not to necessarily convince them, but at least to frame it out in a way where you can have an ongoing discussion and consideration. You think in terms of change model, to be able to help the person to really contemplate. I think very often within the world that I work and the frustrations I had and what got me writing is when I would try to make these referrals in the past, people were very connected to their own world of kind of eligibility and what made someone qualify and this idea of readiness, not being ready. And I think it's really about not only how we make these offerings to the client, but also how we frame things about the person we're trying to help to the systems of care and how we build those bridges. So we're kind of a mediator between the two, the client's world and the systems world.
That's really helpful, Jay, and it speaks a lot too. It makes me think, when I hear what you say, I think about the work we're doing here in Newcastle and Gateshead, and what we call the different areas is silos, because they tend to have created their own world of mental health and of housing and homelessness and of, say, addiction or offending services. And they have their own, as in your words, Jay, house of language. So they have their own jargon, those worlds, and it's often very difficult to kind of enter that world. And often professionals aren't aware of how much they're using a particular. A good way I find to think about it is like a genre. It's almost like there's a science fiction genre for novels, and then there's a action adventure genre. So if you work in addiction, you talk in a certain way. If you work in mental health, there's certain ways of thinking. And the worker, from what you've said, has to enter the language of the person they're trying to help who's homeless, but then almost be multilingual or bilingual and understand these other worlds, and then be a translator to translate mental health issues into the language that the client might use to say, actually, I tend to take non-prescribed medication, and then use the language that they're using, but then also have that skill of being able to understand these other worlds. So it's really interesting about a dialogue going on between different worlds. So I just wondered whether Robin or Claire wanted to respond to this, what you said there about these other worlds and about communicating between them.
Thank you. I would agree with that totally. The amount of times that I've actually advised providers to use certain terminology in order to voluntary service providers to use certain terminology to get a response either from statutory services or funding organisations, it increasingly so that you have to use certain terminology in order to get a suitable response. Definitely, absolutely agree with that.
And that's an example of you being able to speak Greek to the Greeks. Is a phrase, it's like to be able to, but it's very difficult, I think, to understand, because we work across all the different silos. There's a challenge there to understand the world of how the way people think within different professional disciplines, the kind of discourses or relatively stable sets of ideas that have grown up. And it's quite frustrating because often this client group have serious mental health problems and often meet the diagnostic criteria, say for personality disorder is very common for maybe 90% of our clients. And then also for others, also meet the criteria for schizophrenia, but actually there's a tension, and they may not want to use that language, and also it may be difficult to get an assessment. So some systems are set up into a categorical approach, which to get into their world of services and resources that might be helpful. And the same goes for the other bits of the system. So there's a challenge there about understanding the language and the relatively stable sets of ideas within each of these worlds, which is a challenge for the worker, who's also then trying to be respectful and understand how the person understands their world and their narrative. Robin, did you want to respond to this idea?
Yeah, I totally agree with all of this. Being a psychiatric social worker, working in a multidisciplinary team, it often seemed to me that my job was to try and translate medical and diagnostic thinking, which is what the service was thinking, into the language that the client could actually use, or often the carers or neighbors even sometimes. But likewise, to translate between the real world, the ordinary world, the kind of the everyday world, to speak that back to the medical people who would see everything simply in terms of diagnosis and what's the right treatment and so on, and try and get more of a dialogue. And it had me thinking that when I was at school, I did languages and history. And everybody thought that I was going to get a job and be a linguist because I seemed to be quite good at it. And at the time I was kind of, no, I don't want to do that. I want to say things afresh. I want to say my own new things and not just translate other people's to them. How pointless, how boring, how kind of menial is that? Now I realize that actually I am still just a linguist. Or all I think I'm doing is trying to translate and communicate and help people communicate. And that's what I particularly liked about Jay's books. Because I think Jay's writing goes into the actual skills of what you called common language construction. You've gone into that in a way that's kind of both more detailed but also much more accessible for our particular situation than any other reading I've come across. That's why I was delighted to then make your acquaintance more.
Yeah, that's great. And Jay, well, also comes to mind is there's a guy, a Russian guy called Bakhtin, and without getting into kind of jargon and a bit of too much theory, he has a dialogical approach, which we've tried in these psychological, the three we've run up here in Newcastle. We've had a dialogical pie, as it were, where we value everybody's point of view. So even if it's, you could hear the psychiatrist's point of view, but then you value grandma's point of view as well, in terms of having a dialogue between these different worlds. And then it helps to kind of find, when people are stuck, to keep opening up the dialogue, a kind of open dialogue that they're trialing in the UK actually at the moment. It's from Western Lapland. Keep opening up the dialogue until it makes sense enough to find a route, a journey to recovery. And so I think there's something about being open to one of the principles we've applied then in our face-to-face work is tolerating the uncertainty of not knowing what's actually going on, which I think is a tension between a professional approach, which is often the pressure is to say you know exactly what's going on and it is this or that. But I think it's difficult to do that because it's difficult to tolerate the uncertainty of not knowing and to keep inviting other perspectives in, because the culture is about trying to say, oh, I do know, and it's that person's fault or this person's fault. Whereas actually to say, well, I'm not sure what's going on. I'll tolerate some uncertainty. I'll keep opening up the dialogue. And I wondered what you thought about that idea about tolerating uncertainty and opening up the dialogue when the work you're doing with clients.
Yes, well, I think as a counselor, that's absolutely essential. And I think of it, I haven't really used the frame of dialogical approach so much before. I've been reading about it more recently, but I do think of it in terms of narrative.
Narrative, yeah.
Yes, and in a narrative approach, we think of it as, people are experts on their own worlds. So it's not really the counselor's job to tell people kind of what their world should look like or how they should be thinking or whatever. We need to be good listeners is really where things begin. And again, it's all about, I think, authentic connection and understanding. And then from there, problem solving, with the person in regard to perhaps what their goals are. So really the whole pre-treatment model that I do is about helping people, not just the folks we're trying to work with, but the systems, to come up with an approach and a way of assessing and thinking about things that gets rid of what I would call the bias toward readiness. You know, like if you get too connected into your world, then you have a very strict criteria of what it means to be ready for services. But I think if you're more open the way you're talking, Ray, then what we're saying is that there's many roads to recovery, and there's many ways to do that, and we can learn from each other these different ways. So I think group process can be really important and make a real difference for folks. When you can institute that, not everybody, you know, is so comfortable in a group format.
Yeah, so there's something about flexibility there, and maybe some of the steps that some of the resources that are there in those different silos or different areas hard to access for the most complex cases of the most complex needs and multiple needs and complex trauma, because the step is too big, as it were, because they want you to be ready for treatment, ready to go to, whereas actually there might be a lot of smaller steps. And there's that translating going on about saying, well, the world works a bit like this in terms of rehab and your choices about recovery or mental health. And there is a lot of translating into everyday language.
I just wanted to add just one last thing on this, and that is that I think many of the providers we work with get really stuck within their treatment language, their program language. So I think what you were talking about from a dialogical approach is, you know, it's important because it's really dealing with uncertainty, that you're there really to learn the language of the people you're working with and to translate, as opposed to just being stuck in your world and language and waiting for the client to accept that or not. And I think that's actually a big mistake to make in working with the population we're talking about.
Yeah, trying to co-create some meaning and search for meaning in these narratives with these other people. So, Claire or Robin, any thoughts or questions for Jay maybe about this?
Just to say that
I'm gonna have to plug in, so give me 1 minute while you guys talk.
Yeah.
Robin, you.
I'll wait till Jay's
just
back.
while we wait for Jay, Claire, so I think it'd be helpful to let the people watching know that there's a really, really helpful and pretty short resource that you've written, which is the PI guidance. So people could look that up. Westminster City Council have published it, and you wrote it, but it's very helpful.
Wow. Yes, I put it together. It's based on the original DCLG guidance. And it's sort of put into a sort of shorter version, more practical sort of toolkit. And what it does is it talks about the key elements of a PI, what the objectives of those key elements are, and then gives examples of how you can meet those objectives. But it's not prescriptive. It's not saying this is what you have to do to get to this point. It's very much just encouraging, giving ideas and encouraging discussion within services to think about how they could get to the point of meeting that element. So whether that's relationship building or the physical environment. And hopefully it'll just stimulate discussion and help people to feel that it's more. I think people felt it was a little bit sort of the psychological element was a bit mystifying for people, but hopefully this will sort of help to break that down a little bit for people.
Yep. That's really helpful. So just so I let Jay know, we were just while you were plugging in, I was just encouraging Claire to share this really good document that she's produced around PI, which helps people to start a discussion and open up dialogue. Sorry, Robin, were you going to say something?
Well, two connections there. I was hoping to join up here, so killing two birds with one dialogue stone. On the one hand, I was also going to mention to Jay that Claire has just been working to produce this document, which is kind of like a simple user's guide, a toolkit to developing a PI. And I was wondering how that might go down in the States, say, where this idea is still kind of new. And I think it'd be really interesting to see to what extent Claire's version has more traction, makes more immediate sense to people than the more long-winded version. But the other connection I was going to make is that we're talking about our own individual journeys and about the journeys of individual service users as they approach and then are repelled by and then approach and bounce off services and all those kind of the minutiae of person-to-person engagement. But services themselves are on a journey. We've been saying repeatedly that this idea of a psychologically informed environment isn't a place to be. It is itself a journey. And the idea that services too are trying to see what they need to do, how do they need to work differently, what do they need to learn, what could they be inspired by, where do they get the tricks of the trade from? You know, it seems to me that we're all talking about, we're all using journey and narrative as kind of metaphor.
We might be a bit like The Hobbit. I don't know if you've all seen the film The Hobbit. We're all a band heading off to the magic mountain of better services for this client group, and in various ways some of those journeys have been going on for decades. And there are challenges, but I was wondering if Jay could respond to those comments about about the idea of services are on a journey, and whether Claire's document around PI guidance might help on that journey. How would you respond to that, Jay?
Well, I think getting around the table, the different systems of care, and to hear people really share and have a very fertile kind of cross-cultural, cross-system sharing of what works and why people kind of do the type of approaches that they do, and then to have some guidance from places like Claire and what she's developed in regard to PI, or even the PI website for people to come in and have these relationships and discussions and read some of the research that's on there is I think wonderful. So I think it's really all about getting us out of our silos, out of our own singular worlds, and to be able to cross-fertilize and help each other with our journey, because ultimately our mission is really about connection and service and helping others. So we all have that in common, so it's a good starting point. So I think it's all good. In the States we do a lot of stuff around trauma-informed approaches, and I think there's a relationship between that and psychologically informed environments, and I think that's an excellent way of looking at kind of developing the common language that has to really take place, not just on the client level, but between systems of care. So what's the nuances between psychologically informed environments and trauma-informed care, and how can we develop that further together and learn from each other? It's kind of a cross-cultural journey that we can begin taking by having these types of conversations.
That's so exciting, and it is about, I think that's somewhere where new technology like Blab could help, because on the one hand you could bring people together from different worlds of services, and we could invite people using services as well, with experts by experience group we have of people with lived experience, and I could look into bringing someone on who's got some recent lived experience of homelessness to be part of the 4-part discussion, and then that could lead to kind of a creation of a new kind of truths, a new kind of insights, where people from different parts of the system share what they know and what they don't know. So that I do think that idea of a journey, we're all on a journey, and in a way we're all kind of characters in each other's stories, we could think, like we come together and we can help each other out on this journey of trying to improve services for that really group of people with complex needs, and we can learn from each other. So I think the new technology allows a bit more of the communication, maybe internationally as we're doing today, and to share ideas quite quickly, because you can post like links. I don't do it now in case I knock myself off, but you can Google and post your links to kind of Claire's guidance. We could put that into if you had the link, you could post it into the messages, or someone else could, and to Jay's website and things. So there's a way to cross-fertilize, and people can watch the recording of the video when it gets, the film when it gets sent out. So there's an excitement about the journeys we're on might speed up, because we can share ideas more quickly. So it's exciting, the journey metaphor. Claire and Robin, any thoughts about the journey and how we can maybe help each other out on this journey a bit more quickly?
I think you summed
Over to you.
You summed it up perfectly there. It's about sharing ideas, talking regularly, sharing each other's knowledge and getting it out there via social media. Definitely.
Yeah.
If I could just add, I think another important aspect of this is storytelling, and I think sometimes we don't do enough of that. I mean, you really have to. That's why when I wrote the books I wrote, I do a lot of stories or narratives through it, because I think there's even lessons within that even as I'm telling it, I might not realize the different lessons or insights that can come from the story. So I think to have, the different systems of care really, kind of tell their story, their mission, some of the work that they've done, to share. A lot of it is just the sharing and to get away from the guardedness and, I don't want to be judged by these other systems, and rather to open up and to hear feedback.
But I think, Jay, that's a really important point, but you've hit a really crucial issue there, which is there's a tension, I think, because interweaving our narratives, whether it's to do with services, learning from each other, and telling our stories maybe, and giving a voice to the people using our services is very important, but people don't want to share the things that their uncertainties, the doubts, the conflicted thoughts, the idea that sometimes it's very hard and there's a lot of emotional wear and tear on the frontline staff and to managers as well, who sometimes spend, I spent most of the morning dealing with an adult protection issue that took lots of time. So it's difficult to encourage, create a trusting environment, and that's what I hope we can maybe do on Blab, even though it's a public TV, basically a live public TV and recording, but to create an environment where people can share a bit of the vulnerabilities, a bit of the uncertainties, rather than having to share a glossy, it all works very well. Because actually, as we all know, because we've all worked in this area for a long time, it's confusing, sometimes overwhelming emotionally. I sometimes struggle. I'm just coming out of a bit of a period of depression myself, if I'm honest, and it's hard work. But actually, we can encourage each other. But I think the point I was trying to pick up on, Jay, was that I think often services want to present a very a front which kind of says all is well, because understandably services want to keep their funding but actually the learning is more about the sharing a bit of the uncertainty and the difficulties and when things didn't work out, but it needs a bit of a trusting environment to do that. Any thoughts about that issue about how do we encourage people to share a bit of the reality of the toughness of the work from anyone?
Well,
from a commission's point of view, I would say yes. People only really want to talk about their success, and I think you have to remind people that failure is just as important. Learning what doesn't work is just as important as learning what does work, and allowing people to experiment. But certainly over here, I think people are going to retract from that more and more because of cuts in funding that are going to be coming, unfortunately. But if we can create a place where people feel safe enough to do that, then that's great. Personally, I would like for people to talk about what works, learn more about, get ideas, expanding the examples of what works well and what good outcomes are, because the bottom line is, whether we agree with it or not, very often you are only going to get funding if you can evidence your outcomes, and be successful outcomes. So that'd be useful for me.
Yeah, I think that's great, and that's what we could produce. You sound a little bit poor, but just for maybe next time, one of those things might help, either the ear bud with a little sound on or something. But it's good enough for this week, so don't worry about it now. But it's just sharing about sometimes the audio helps to have something else plugged in. So yeah, I think we can just it's that what we're trying to do is role model a bit of new technology and be a bit of what they call early adopters, to show, isn't it exciting? Most of the people here I met in different ways, but I think I Skyped with Claire and we've tried this Blab. It kind of role models that actually we can share ideas. So people, just even in the room here of the 4 people, you've got examples of a resource of PyLink. You've got the books and the YouTube films are quite helpful of Jay's as well. And you've got the pie guidance of Claire's. You've got a wealth of resources within just this virtual kind of creation discussion amongst 4 people here, which shows you that it's possible to build connections. Sorry, Robin, were you going to?
Ray, yeah, can I come into the... partly, I've got a bit of a sore throat. You notice I'm a little bit... I'm not quite as sparkly sometimes as I am. And I've had... me and my wife staying with some friends in London. We've had 3 nights bad sleep. So I'm really kind of a little bit worn thin. But we've just got somebody come to join us who's talking about working with street homeless people using soccer, what we call football. I'm wondering whether we should try... Now we know this Blab thing means that people can take a back seat and somebody else can come in. Why don't we take the opportunity for me to sit out for it, and let's see if... Jay, if you're happy to, ask us to... Ray will explain the process, but I'd be really interested to hear more about what it is that you're doing and how it's working. Yeah,
so as long as I've just said to Jay Block, so we might just try this, because we're probably already going for another sort of 10 minutes, if that's okay with people, partly because I've got another meeting to get to, but we might try experiment with Robin coming off, and see whether, because you can always come back in again, but then whether J Block would be willing to kind of come on and ask us, or maybe just share a bit about what you're doing. Would that be okay, J Block? To do with the Homeless World Cup, because I think we've part of in Newcastle and Gateshead we've taken part in that as well. So shall we try? Because you can always come in, Robin, if J Block can't come in. Shall I ask you to? Are you sure you want to keep this person? Okay. Whoa. So I've popped Robin off as the host. But if J Block would like to come in, I don't know if you have time, and you might not want to, which is absolutely fine. If you just write a message in the comments if you'd rather not come on live. But it's an experiment to see whether, obviously, you're working around football homelessness in New York City and the World Cup, which we've taken part in here as well. Whether you want to kind of ask to come in, which means you click on the open seat, J Block, New York City. 2 seconds. Oh, yeah. So what J Block's going to try and come on. And I think this is an exciting thing, because what happens is, like from Australia, someone came on when we started experimenting early on, me and Robin, and they'd worked with veterans in Australia. We've had someone talk from Japan. So it's that idea that we could share international ideas. Oh, Jay, come back, Jay. We could share international ideas about what Claire was saying there, what works, maybe what doesn't work as well, or some of the... And then people realize that it's a little bit more to do with some systemic problems to do with the system, if they're also happening in New York City and Japan and Australia, rather than it's a very local problem. And you can tease out some of the local solutions to problems. So what we're hoping to do is J Block will come in. Claire, just while we're waiting for J Block to come in, and I don't know, Jay's picture's gone off, but hopefully he'll come back again. Is there a link where people could find your pie guidance?
Oh, yes, it's actually on the PieLink website, Robin's PieLink website. If you put in psychologically informed toolkit, I think that should bring it up. Or there's the Making Every Adult Matter website,
Yeah, and it's on there as well.
On there. I don't have a website myself, but I don't need to, because I've got everything on Robin's site. So I can tweet it again. I've got a link I can tweet out.
If you could, and people can follow you at Pie Peoples. It's at Pie Peoples, isn't it, Claire?
Yes, and I really genuinely want feedback on whether people find it useful or not, because if it isn't, then we need to try something else. So
good. You really appreciate the feedback, and I think on the actual guidance is your email as well, contact, so people could send it there. Is that right?
Yeah.
Good. So what I might do is, I seem to be seeing 2 pictures of myself, and we're just hoping for J Block to come on for the last sort of 5 minutes to kind of see, but I'm hoping Jay can come back in, but I might just click off for a minute and click back on again, just so that it... can you see What do you see, Claire? Can you see me? Or do you see two pictures of me?
No, just one.
Oh, okay. So if Jay, I can't see Jay anymore, but if Jay could come back in, or oh, here's Jay. Oh no, this is
Yes, it's Jay.
Oh, hi, Jay.
Hey guys, how are you? I apologize. I am
We're on a learning curve here. Don't apologize, Jay. We're learning. We're trying some new technology out, and we're just going for it.
Well, I'm very familiar with this platform, so I'm so pleased to see you guys here. And I mean, it was totally by accident that I decided to come on Blab this morning. And you know, I don't have a lot of time, but I'm thrilled to see what you're doing, and I would love to help support you and be a part of your efforts and in a number of different ways. I think that there's. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, that would be great.
I just want to make clear that the reason it took me a moment to get in is right now I'm on my cell phone and I'm trying to find your thing on my desktop actually, because it's always better to do this on your desktop than it is on your phone. And also as I heard before. Claire, it absolutely makes a huge difference to just have a little. This makes a huge difference, and for everybody, not just you, but for the viewers as well. Okay.
Okay.
It's as simple as whatever headset comes with your phone.
With the little,
it helps the little feedback that you're hearing. Any external sound, it protects everybody, and it makes for this kind of experience. You want it to be as clear and clean and you don't need a studio. You don't need a special mic with a cover over it. And anyway.
That's really helpful. So we've already probably got about 5 minutes, Jay. So what would be really helpful is maybe two things. One is it'd be good to hear what you're involved with. And the other thing is if you're trying to help out by communicating this, I'll schedule another Blab for the same time next week, which is Friday at 12 in the UK. I think that might be 7 a.m. in New York City. I'd have to check, and then we could tweet it out and tell people about it in terms of homelessness. Oh, Jay's back as well. Hi, Jay. So, do you want to just?
I'll drop out.
Okay, Jay in. Thanks, Robin. Jay, do you want to just tell us what you're involved with?
Sure. So, first of all, I am in New York City.
Yep.
Okay. I'm working with an organization called Street Soccer USA.
Street Soccer USA. Yeah.
Yes. Actually, I'm working with them in a couple of different areas, but for me, the rewards, as I'm sure is exactly why you guys have this interest, is quite. It's not about anything else other than getting to know these people and watch them change their lives in a positive manner. So, what Street Soccer USA does nationally, but then it's also a feeder into the Homeless World Cup.
Yeah.
Which is exactly that. It's a World Cup held around the world once a year that caters to selective individuals from these type of organizations like Street Soccer USA.
Mm-hmm.
So there are other organizations like a Street Soccer USA around the world.
Yeah, we've taken part in the World Cup from Newcastle and Gateshead in the northeast coast of England, so it's definitely. So, do you find football is a good way to engage some people?
Well, the way that I got involved is actually growing up. I played soccer internationally, so for me on a personal level, the combination of that and obviously giving and supporting an organization that caters to supporting people trying to improve their lives and helping them get the message here is using soccer or football to teach these individuals who struggled with drugs or have whatever reason they've come to this place in their lives, and to the point of maybe they were on their deathbed or maybe they were in prison or whatever. Every single story is different. And they come to the soccer practice or they play in soccer games or football games, however you prefer to call it. Obviously, it's the biggest word in the world, right? There are a few different names for it, but it's the biggest game in the world.
Yep.
But what it teaches people, how to work with others, how to show up on time, how to communicate on the field, as well as some other things that are used to support what the program's mission is. It's really an amazing experience, and it's to me, these kinds of platforms are so. We're guinea pigs here on these platforms, okay?
Yeah.
And for organizations like this, for exposure globally, instantly, for a free platform, for an audience that's growing in every direction. Are any of you on Periscope or Meerkat or any of the other platforms?
I do Periscope, so I'm going to be Periscoping out some training around Pi in January. If anyone's interested in that, they can email me. But also, I've got to Periscope a little bit about this framework that I've written, just as an experiment to see as a way to communicate through live streaming. I don't know about Jay and Claire, whether they're interested in that.
I haven't been on that, but I like what Jay Block is talking about in terms of soccer and football, and this idea of also building community. It's not just the lessons learned, but it's really this piece of the isolation that we often see that goes along with people being homeless, or even people that we house initially after homelessness. Often there's a real big issue with isolation. So people finding a community that they can connect to, feel part of a common mission, finding a sense of meaning and purpose is such a basic part of being human. I really look at it that we are meaning makers, and soccer, football, sports is a great way of doing that. Besides, it's just this point of adding meaningful structure.
Definitely, definitely. And belonging, so people can feel they belong. A number of our clients get involved in a homeless football or soccer games, in terms of it's so important to feel you belong. And belonging to a team and sport can be one of those routes. It's not for everyone, but it can be a route in where you don't need much to get going. You can be accepted, especially if it's a team that's set up deliberately to be accepting of diversity, difference, and people who've had struggles. I know I was speaking yesterday to someone who particularly felt in all their recovery that attending the recovery of the football, and this is a few years now, has been the most constant thing in their life. And now they're in full-time employment and doing really well and very useful to others. Yeah. But the football weekly, Jay, had been such an important part of their recovery, and that they valued that. So it was a valuable thing to try out.
Well, it definitely is huge. I mean, look, there wouldn't be a Homeless World Cup if it wasn't successful. Now, actually, there's some very extremely powerful people involved in the Homeless World Cup. Just to, if you look it up, you'll see they are behind this completely, and one of the wealthiest men in the world is involved in it. So, the things that are going around in the world using this platform. But coming back to, I know you have to go. I have to go. Yeah. I am involved in other nonprofits as well, but this is one that I'm more involved in personally. And it's more personal to me, just in terms of the sport and what it has done for me, relating to also the individuals involved. Yeah. So
that's really helpful, Jay. So what I was thinking was, because we need to kind of draw this blab on Pi to a close, is people can Google Homeless World Cup or Soccer World Cup as well, and look that up. And to thank everyone that's come on. And we're just going to start to draw it to a close. And it's exciting because as people can come on, we can have these unexpected dialogues between, say, homelessness and soccer, and make these connections. And the fact that the recording can get sent out as well, and kind of sent to other people to watch. There's a tremendous amount of ways to help each other on our journey. So it's exciting. I suppose I wanted to thank Jay Block for coming on and talking about that. And hopefully you could come next week, maybe, to the same time, same place.
You start at what time?
12 in the UK, so it'd be...
Well, it's 7:50 now, so you started an hour ago?
7 a.m. in New York City.
Okay, so
that'd be good. And then I wanted to also ask Jay and Claire whether you had any sort of what they call takeaways from today or reflections on our first attempt at kind of inviting you on to reflect on Blab.
Before you do your takeaways, if I could say one last thing, guys.
Yes, of course, Jay.
I followed all of you on Twitter, and I definitely, if any of you would like to touch base offline, or I definitely would like to try. I'd like to get the founder of Street Soccer involved in this, or at least someone that they feel would like to be here to help you start this. Okay,
come on and have a conversation. That'd be exciting. That'd be great.
Yeah. So and I mean, they're in the city as well, and I'm in close contact with them. So
that'd be really good, and it's really good to connect with you, Jay Block, and we'll connect on Twitter, and people can follow you just to let everyone else know. But that's so exciting, Jay Block. Really appreciate that, and it'd be good to get someone on, to have these conversations. So thank you.
My pleasure, and thank you guys. And I'm so pleased again. Blab is a place that's growing, and I think that given the topic, but also given your professionalism of all of you, including the gentleman that left, I think his name was sorry,
Robin Johnson.
Yes, Robin. Right? Yeah, Robin. Of course. I mean, I think that this is definitely a great place to start. It's a great platform. The other platforms are great as well. I actually work with people on strategies of how to use them all together. So, meaning Periscope, Meerkat, and other platforms. But that's my concentration. So, and I'm looking to build that. So,
I really appreciate that, Jay. It's so good you came on, and thanks for connecting. And then I'm just going to ask Claire and Jay if they've got any sort of reflections and takeaways from today's journey. So, on our journey, we've connected on Blab and reflected today about all sorts of things. So, Jay and Claire, see you, Jay Block.
Thanks so much, guys.
Take care.
Any final thoughts?
I just really value the cross-cultural connections and the chances to, really talk about some different approaches, whether it's pre-treatment or PI. I want to hear a little more about, what Claire has to say on PI, and I'm excited to read some of her work on that. And just this point of really getting into the discussion up and back, so we can develop what I would call a common language and a really getting a nice cross-fertilization of things. And to have these unexpected visitors come on is really fantastic, because I think, it just adds a whole nother dimension. Who thought we'd be ending with, football and soccer?
Yeah, it's random, very dialogical. Claire, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree completely. I remember when I first met Robin, one of our key aims was to create a community of PI where people were talking and sharing ideas with each other. And we've been looking for different platforms, and this looks like a fantastic one. It's the first time I've used Blab. I'm intrigued by it and very excited to be part of it. So thank you.
Yeah, very exciting, Claire. And probably next time you'll have a bit better audio.
Yes, I'll try.
Great. Robin, any final thoughts from this? Is Blab number 4, I think, maybe?
4 or 5, yeah. My feeling is that we're learning all the time about what works and how to make it work, how to get the best out of it. That clearly, we were preoccupied with things like, how do you sign in the first place? Do you have to be on Twitter? Oh no, Now we're starting to look at things like, okay, make sure that you're not against the light, otherwise you'll be silhouetted. There are kind of filming techniques and sound
production quality,
sound techniques. But none of it's rocket science. All of it's quick and easy stuff that you can quite quickly pick up. So I think we're learning really, really fast. And getting that guy J Block. I want some stuff on Street Soccer on the PI link. Let's get a little story. Let's get a video. Let's get how visual is that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. It's really exciting the way every connection makes something completely new. Yeah, and it's that buzz.
I think the live TV helps. The kind of randomness of the way that people can come on and talk about homeless soccer. And then it could spark this idea in other people's minds about let's get a video. And so what I'd say is thanks for everyone's reflections and takeaways, as they say, and everybody that's watched and people watching internationally on the recordings as well. But do follow Levy on Twitter and Robin Pielink and Pie Peoples, Claire Richy, and myself, Dialogical_Ray, on Twitter, because you can see things advertised there about other connections, but also do the other things, which is like sign up to pielink.net and do connect with people. So I just wanted to kind of thank everyone for being willing to try out this new technology, be early adopters, and connect this kind of a community of practice really around people with multiple complex needs and homelessness, and it's very exciting. So thanks, Claire, thanks, Levy, but also Block, and thanks, Robin. And I'll probably draw it to a close there. So thanks, everyone.
And we'll see you next week.
And you can follow people on Blab as well, so you can click on everybody on Blab and follow them, including Block and Levy. Thank you. See you next week. Same time, same place. Exciting stuff. Thanks, everyone.